cross-stitch design involves a different digitizing technique to ordinary embroidery design. For this reason, hatch cross-stitch is a separate application to the main hatch embroidery application. It also has a different work environment with different settings for design size and density. Like the main application, you will do most of your design work with an image backdrop. Design viewing is also different to hatch embroidery. In this lesson, we'll cover various settings, design size and density, working with backdrops, and handling cross-stitch design files. Once you've activated the cross-stitch gem, it can be accessed from the Hatch Embroidery file menu. Because cross-stitch uses different stitch types and different digitizing techniques, cross-stitch is performed in a separate program. Hatch must still remain open to use it. So here we are in the cross-stitch program. You'll see similarities to the main Hatch Embroidery program. We have our menus across the top. We have a toolbar. We have two modes. Right now I'm in design mode, and if I go to picture mode, I don't have a picture loaded because I've already deleted this picture. I like to think of these as layers. Notice that when I'm in picture mode, I have these tools, and when I'm in design mode, I have these tools. When I'm in design mode, I can see the picture or hide the picture, but I can't do anything to the picture. In picture mode, I can't see the stitches at all. I can only work with the image. Now, before we go much further, let me show you where you can access the full manual. So we have a reference manual here, and you can see everything you need to know about hatch cross-stitch. So you'll want to set up your working environment. We do not have rulers in here like we do in the regular hatch program. That's because we measure cross-stitch differently. It's measured by how many squares per inch we have, and that's called fabric count. So for example, here I have a relatively large hoop. Here I have a 150 by 150 hoop. This helps me see how big my design is going to be. Notice that we have a grid. You can probably see these slightly heavier lines. I have this set to 10 squares per major line. I can hide the grid, and I can right-click on the grid to set my settings. I can change the distance between the lines. Now remember, we are talking in X's here, or cross stitches. I could set this to 5. I usually like to leave it at 10. I can change the colors. So I might like to make the minor lines a little bit lighter. I can use a custom color. We make that a little bit darker. Click OK. OK. And there we have that. I can also access those options from the settings menu and options. I can change my background color. You might change your background for a more realistic look or something that contrasts better with the thread colors you're using. You can also pick a fabric. If you pick a fabric, you'll need to navigate to where your fabrics are stored in the Hatch folder. You can see that I have a different size hoop here than I had in the roses design that you saw at the beginning. We can change our hoop setting. We can go back to Options, or we can right-click on the hoop tool. Currently I have display hoop on, and we have all our hoop choices here. And you just scroll through and pick the size hoop that you want to work with. I'll click Cancel. To set your fabric count, go up to Settings, Fabric Count. Currently I'm set at 14 stitches per inch. So that means there are 14 squares to an inch. I can measure in metric, but typically in hand cross stitch, we measure our fabric in stitches per inch. Now notice what the size is here. If I change this to 10 stitches per inch and click OK, you can see that it looks like my hoop shrunk, but actually my design got bigger because my stitches are larger. I'll go back to Settings, Fabric Count, and this time let's do 18 stitches per inch. And I'll click OK. Now if I want this to be my normal setting, I would click Update. I'm going to just click OK. And there we have a slightly smaller design. As you make your stitches more stitches per inch, your little X's get smaller. So you could reach a point where a quarter of that cross stitch is going to get really short. Down on our stitch and color bar, we can choose an outline stitch by clicking this icon, or we can click fills by using this icon. And we have different stitch types. Currently I'm set to 2 threads. I can change this to 2, 4, or 6. And that's just the number of passes or crossovers when it stitches at the machine. I can right click on the color and it'll bring up my colors palette. And I can move it around. You can right click to make it stay or just left click it once and it'll bring it up and you can choose a color and then it'll go away. To see how the number of passes affects your design, check out this small little flower design. At 2 threads we have 1,397 stitches. At 4 threads we have 3,221 stitches. And at 6 threads we have 5,045 stitches. So when you actually stitch this, it will look more dense. Now a tip here is if you have a really large, fully filled cross-stitch design, it can become quite stitch intensive. And it can cause a lot of pull when stitching at the machine. So it needs to be stabilized properly or you can get gaps going down in what looks like rows. And it can look like stripes of missing stitches. Another thing to think about is the smaller your stitch, the more it's going to bulk up. So if you have a really high fabric count, which means smaller stitches, and you have 6 threads, you can have a really bulky, dense design. Picture mode is used to select, insert, scan, dim, and save an image. So to insert a picture, we'll click on Load Picture, and then I'll navigate to the picture I want to use. The picture does need to be a bitmap. We can see the image. I can select it. I can resize it. I can rotate it. Click it again. I'll undo that. I can skew it. And I can undo that. Another way to resize it, I'll right click on it. And maybe I know that I want it to be 75 stitches across. I can also input the exact squares here, or I could just enter 92 and I'll click OK. As long as I'm in picture mode, I can manipulate my picture. I might also want to dim it while I'm working on it. I don't have a scanner attached, but I could scan. And if you've made any resizing or skewing choices, you might want to save your image. When I go to design mode, I can see my image and I can add stitches, but I can't otherwise select my image. It's protected. If I want to hide my image, I can just click the picture button on the main toolbar. While you're working in Hatch Cross Stitch, you'll toggle between different viewing modes to better visualize and understand your design. So here we see the stitch view, and here we see the tile view. I often find that working in tile view is easier when I'm placing stitches over a cross stitch pattern. Down on the bottom we can view design information. We can select from outlines and fills, and we have different stitch types. If I right click on that, I can expand it out and see the various stitches. We also have the status bar. This shows us our pointer position. Here we see the stitch count, and here we see the zoom factor. Cross-stitch files have their own EMX file format. You can also open an EMX file in Hatch and combine it with other designs in other formats. To save, you can click on the Save icon or click File Save As. Or just save if you've already saved it. A good rule of thumb for any computer work is to save your design early and save it often. Hatch Cross Stitch does not auto-save. An important thing to know is that EMX files are stitches-only files, but they are editable in the Hatch Cross Stitch program. When you do open EMX files in Hatch, it's a good idea to open them as stitches only, so that Hatch won't try to convert them into objects. You can't save as EMX from Hatch, and the Hatch Cross Stitch program can't open an EMB file. You will want to maintain that EMX file in case you want to change the fabric count, the number of threads, or make changes to the stitches themselves. In the next lesson, we'll learn about digitizing cross stitch.